Document. Part 1. The school cafeteria buzzed with the usual chaos of teenagers. The smell of reheated pizza and soggy fries filled the air, mixing oddly with the faint scent of cleaning supplies from the morning's mop job. Students sat in clusters at long tables, their voices rising and falling like a restless tide. Some laughed loudly over inside jokes while others whispered secrets behind cupped hands. It was just another ordinary day at Lincoln High, until she walked in, Ava. Carter stepped through the double doors, her black sneakers squeaking slightly on the tiled floor. She clutched a brown paper lunch bag in one hand and scanned the room with sharp, observant eyes. Her dark hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail, and her plain gray hoodie blended in with the sea of casual outfits around her. But there was something about her that made heads turn. Not because she looked flashy or stood out, but because she seemed different somehow. Quiet, confident. Like she didn't care what anyone thought. She found an empty spot at the far end of the cafeteria, near the windows where sunlight streamed in weakly through streaky glass panes. Sliding onto the bench, Ava placed her lunch bag on the table and began unpacking its contents methodically. A sandwich wrapped in foil, a small container of apple slices, and a bottle of water. She didn't glance up as curious stares followed her movements. To anyone watching, it might have seemed like she didn't notice, or maybe she just didn't care. Across the room, Jake Miller leaned back in his chair, balancing precariously on two legs as he surveyed the scene. He was tall for his age, with broad shoulders and messy blonde hair that always looked styled even when it wasn't. His blue eyes sparkled mischievously, hinting at the trouble he often caused. Sitting beside him were Ryan and Chris, his loyal sidekicks who laughed at every joke he made, no matter how lame. Together they ruled the school, or at least they acted like they did. Jake tilted his head toward the new girl. "Who's that?" he asked, nodding discreetly in Ava's direction. Ryan squinted, pretending to study her before shrugging. "Dunno, never seen her before." "Probably some loser transfer," Chris chimed in, snickering. "Look at her clothes, so basic." Jake smirked, leaning forward until his chair hit all four legs again. "Well, if she thinks she can just waltz in here without saying hi to us, she's got another thing coming." He glanced at his friends, who exchanged knowing grins. They'd done this plenty of times before. Messing with new kids was practically their favorite pastime. It was harmless fun, they told themselves, though deep down they knew better. Without another word, Jake stood up and motioned for Ryan and Chris to follow him. The trio sauntered across the cafeteria, weaving between tables as whispers rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew what was coming next. Some students rolled their eyes, used to Jake's antics, while others leaned forward eagerly, hoping for drama. When they reached Ava's table, Jake planted both hands on the surface and leaned in close. "Hey," he said, his voice dripping with fake friendliness. "You're new, huh?" Ava looked up slowly, her dark eyes meeting his without hesitation. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, in a calm, steady tone, she replied, "Yeah. What's it to you?" Jake blinked, caught off guard by her directness. Most people either cowered under his gaze or tried too hard to impress him. This girl didn't seem fazed at all. Still, he wasn't about to let her get the upper hand. Smirking, he straightened up and crossed his arms. "Just thought I'd introduce myself. Name's Jake. These are my boys, Ryan and Chris." He gestured vaguely to his friends, who nodded stiffly. "We run things around here, so welcome to Lincoln High." Ava raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Thanks," she said flatly, turning her attention back to her sandwich. Jake frowned. No one ignored him. Not like this, anyway. Usually, people scrambled to make nice or at least pretend to be intimidated. But Ava, she acted like he wasn't even worth her time. That stung more than he cared to admit. "Hey," he snapped, louder this time. "I'm talking to you." Slowly, Ava lowered her sandwich and turned to face him again. "And I said thanks," she replied evenly. "Is there something else you want?" Jake hesitated, thrown off balance once again. He hadn't expected this kind of pushback. Normally, he could read people easily, figure out what buttons to press and when, but Ava was unreadable. Still, he couldn't back down now, not with Ryan and Chris watching, not with half the cafeteria waiting to see what would happen next. Deciding to take matters into his own hands, Jake decided to teach her a lesson. Something small, just enough to remind her who was in charge. Grinning smugly, he raised his right hand and swung it toward her cheek, fully intending to deliver a playful slap, a harmless prank meant to embarrass her in front of everyone. But Ava moved faster than anyone could have anticipated. Before Jake's hand could connect, she shot out her own arm and grabbed his wrist mid-swing. Her grip was firm, almost painful, and her expression remained perfectly calm despite the tension crackling in the air. The entire cafeteria went silent, every pair of eyes glued to the scene unfolding before them. Jake froze, stunned. "What? Let go," he sputtered, trying to yank his arm free, but Ava held tight, her fingers like steel bands around his wrist. In a voice so quiet it carried an eerie weight, she said, "Don't ever try that again." For a split second, Jake thought about arguing, about doubling down on his bravado. But something in Ava's gaze stopped him cold. It wasn't anger or fear. It was something else entirely, something harder to define. Whatever it was, it made him feel smaller than he ever had before. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jake muttered, "Fine, sorry." Ava released him instantly, her expression unchanged. Without another word, she picked up her sandwich and resumed eating as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, Jake stumbled backward, rubbing his sore wrist and glaring daggers at her. Ryan and Chris hovered uncertainly behind him, unsure whether to laugh, intervene, or run for cover. As the three of them retreated to their original table, hushed whispers erupted throughout the cafeteria. Speculation flew fast and furious. Who was this girl? Why had she reacted so strangely? And most importantly, why had Jake backed down? For Ava, however, life went on as usual. She finished her lunch in peace, oblivious, or perhaps indifferent, to the storm of gossip swirling around her. If anything, she seemed relieved to be left alone. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a much bigger story, one that would change not only her life but also the lives of everyone at Lincoln High. And somewhere deep inside, buried beneath layers of confusion and disbelief, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he'd made a huge mistake. Document. Part 2. The rest of the school day passed in a blur for Ava. After the cafeteria incident, she tried to focus on her classes, but it was impossible not to notice the whispers and stares that followed her wherever she went. Some students shot her curious glances while others openly gawked as if she were some kind of rare animal at the zoo. Even the teachers seemed distracted, their eyes lingering on her longer than necessary during roll call or when handing out assignments. By the time the final bell rang, Ava felt drained. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and the constant scrutiny made her skin crawl. Still, she kept her head down and her expression neutral, refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her squirm. As she walked out of her last class, she spotted Jake and his friends huddled near the lockers. They weren't looking at her, but their tense body language suggested they hadn't forgotten about what happened earlier either. On the bus ride home, Ava sat alone near the back, staring out the window as the world blurred past. She replayed the scene in her mind over and over again. The way Jake had lunged at her, the split-second decision to grab his wrist, the look of shock on his face when he realized she wasn't going to let him get away with it. It wasn't like she'd planned any of it. Her body had just reacted instinctively, almost as if it knew exactly what to do without her having to think about it. When the bus finally pulled up to her stop, Ava stepped off and trudged up the driveway to her house. It was a modest two-story building with peeling paint and flower boxes under the windows that her grandmother lovingly tended to every spring. Inside, the smell of freshly baked cookies greeted her, mingling with the faint aroma of lavender from the candles scattered around the living room. "Ava," called Maria, her grandmother, from the kitchen. "Is that you?" "Yeah, it's me," Ava replied, dropping her backpack by the door and heading toward the sound of her voice. Maria stood at the counter, rolling out dough for another batch of cookies. Her silver hair was tied back in a loose bun, and her hands moved with practiced ease as she worked. "How was your first day?" Maria asked, glancing up with a warm smile. "Make any new friends?" Ava hesitated, unsure how to answer. "Friends? Not exactly. Unless you counted Jake Miller and his crew trying to slap her cheek as some twisted form of bonding. But she didn't want to worry her grandmother, so she shrugged and said, "It was fine, just different." Maria raised an eyebrow, sensing there was more to the story. Different how? Before Ava could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Pulling it out, she saw notifications lighting up her screen. Texts, social media alerts, even a few friend requests from people she barely knew. Curious, she opened one of the messages. It was a video clip someone had posted online. The footage showed Jake raising his hand toward her in slow motion, followed by her grabbing his wrist with lightning speed. The caption read, "New girl takes down Jake Miller like a boss." Ava groaned and quickly closed the app. Great. Now everyone in school and probably beyond knew about her little showdown. She shoved the phone back into her pocket and avoided Maria's concerned gaze. "What's going on?" Maria asked gently. "You can tell me you know." For a moment, Ava considered brushing it off, pretending everything was fine. But something about her grandmother's steady presence made her cave. Sighing, she sank into a chair at the kitchen table and told Maria everything, from the awkward introductions in the cafeteria to Jake's failed attempt at embarrassing her. Maria listened quietly, her hands pausing mid-roll as Ava spoke. When she finished, Maria nodded thoughtfully. "Well, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself," she said. "But I have to admit, I'm not surprised you handled it so well." Ava frowned. "What do you mean?" Maria wiped her hands on her apron and sat down across from her. For a long moment, she stared at Ava as if weighing her words carefully. Finally, she sighed and said, "There's something I need to tell you. About your family." "My family?" Ava echoed, confused. "What does my family have to do with this?" Maria hesitated, then reached into a drawer and pulled out an old photo album. Flipping it open, she pointed to a picture of a man with dark hair and piercing eyes. He looked familiar, though Ava couldn't quite place him. "This is your grandfather," Maria explained. "Vin Diesel." Ava blinked. "Wait, the Vin Diesel? The actor?" Maria chuckled softly. "Not exactly. Yes, he's famous now, but there's more to his story than meets the eye." She flipped through a few more pages, showing Ava newspaper clippings, official-looking documents, and candid shots of Vin Diesel posing with military personnel or standing in front of high-tech equipment. "Years ago, your grandfather was part of a secret government program designed to enhance human abilities. They experimented on volunteers, altering their DNA to make them stronger, faster, more resilient. Your grandfather was one of the most successful subjects." Ava stared at her, stunned. "So, you're saying I inherited whatever he has?" Maria nodded. "It seems that way. You've always been unusually strong and quick, haven't you? And don't think I didn't notice how you never got sick as a kid no matter what was going around." Memories flooded back to Ava. Times when she'd effortlessly lifted heavy objects, outrun classmates during PE, or recovered from injuries faster than expected. She'd chalked it all up to being naturally athletic, but now it made sense. Those things weren't coincidence, they were part of who she was. "But why didn't anyone tell me sooner?" Ava asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "We wanted to protect you," Maria admitted. "Your grandfather left the program after exposing corruption within it, and ever since we've tried to live quietly. We didn't want you growing up thinking you were different or worse, becoming a target because of it." Ava leaned back in her chair, processing everything. On one hand, she felt angry that such a huge secret had been kept from her. On the other hand, she understood why they'd done it. Life was complicated enough without throwing superhuman abilities into the mix. "So, what am I supposed to do now?" she asked finally. "Just keep pretending I'm normal?" Maria shook her head. "No, you're special, Ava, and there's nothing wrong with embracing that. But you also need to be careful. Use your gifts wisely, and don't let them define you. Remember, it's not about being stronger or faster. It's about being the best version of yourself. Ava nodded slowly, feeling a strange mix of emotions swirling inside her. Pride, fear, excitement, all rolled into one overwhelming wave. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. Things were about to change. Later that evening, after Maria had gone to bed, Ava stayed up late scrolling through her phone. The video of her confrontation with Jake had gone viral within the school community, racking up hundreds of views and comments. Most people praised her for standing up to him, calling her brave and fearless. A few accused her of starting trouble, but their words didn't bother her much. What caught her attention, however, was a comment from someone named a lunchroom legend. Bet she's hiding something. Nobody moves like that unless they've got skills. Ava smiled faintly, closing the app and setting her phone aside. Maybe she was hiding something, but that didn't mean she had to apologize for it. If anything, today had shown her that she was capable of handling whatever came her way. And tomorrow? Well, tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for the first time in a long time, Ava felt ready to face them head on. Document. Part 3. The next morning, Ava woke up with a strange mix of excitement and dread swirling in her stomach. She had spent most of the night thinking about what her grandmother had told her, about her grandfather, Vin Diesel, and the secret experiments that gave him extraordinary abilities. It was hard to wrap her head around the idea that she wasn't just an ordinary girl. The realization felt both thrilling and terrifying, like finding out you were born to play a role in a story much bigger than yourself. As she got ready for school, Ava caught her reflection in the mirror. Her dark eyes stared back at her, sharp and determined. For the first time, she noticed something different about herself. Not just her physical appearance, but the way she carried herself. There was a quiet strength in her posture, a confidence she hadn't fully acknowledged before. Maybe it had always been there, buried beneath layers of uncertainty, or maybe it had only surfaced now that she knew the truth. When Ava arrived at school, she could feel the tension in the air. Students whispered as she passed by, their eyes following her every move. Some looked curious, others wary, but none dared to approach her directly. Even teachers seemed to treat her differently, calling on her less often in class and giving her space during breaks. It was as if everyone was waiting to see what she would do next. By lunchtime, Ava decided to sit outside instead of braving the cafeteria. The weather was mild, and the courtyard offered a peaceful escape from the stares and gossip. She found a quiet spot under a tree and opened her lunch bag, enjoying the solitude. But peace didn't last long. "Hey," came a voice behind her. Ava turned to see Emma Lewis standing there holding a tray of food. Emma was a petite girl with curly brown hair and freckles across her nose. She wasn't part of any particular clique, but it always struck Ava as kind and genuine. "Mind if I join you?" Emma asked, gesturing to the empty spot beside Ava. Ava hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure." Emma sat down and unpacked her lunch, sneaking glances at Ava as she ate. Finally, she blurted out, "So, are you, like, secretly a ninja or something?" Ava nearly choked on her sandwich. "What?" "Well, you know," Emma said, waving her fork in the air. "That thing with Jake yesterday. Nobody moves like that unless they've had training. Martial arts? Gymnastics? Something?" Ava chuckled, softly shaking her head. "Not exactly." Emma leaned closer, her curiosity piqued. "Then what is it? You can tell me. I won't say anything." For a brief moment, Ava considered confiding in Emma. It would be nice to have someone to talk to. Someone who didn't judge her or treat her like some kind of freak. But she remembered her grandmother's warning. Be careful. Instead, she shrugged and said, "Let's just say I'm stronger than I look." Emma raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued, but sensing that Ava wasn't going to elaborate further. "Fair enough," she said with a grin. "But if you ever decide to teach self-defense classes, count me in." They spent the rest of lunch chatting about lighter topics, classes, movies, music, and for the first time since starting at Lincoln High, Ava felt like she might actually belong somewhere. When the bell rang, Emma waved goodbye and promised, to sit with her again tomorrow. Later that afternoon during gym class, rumors about Ava continued to spread. A group of boys gathered near the bleachers, whispering loudly enough for her to overhear. "I heard she used to live in a dojo," one of them said. "Or maybe she's part robot." Ava rolled her eyes, pretending not to care. She focused on the task at hand, a relay race, and pushed herself harder than usual. Her speed and agility left her classmates gaping, especially when she effortlessly outran Alex Carter, the fastest runner in the grade. By the end of the period, even the teacher looked impressed, though he tried to hide it. After school, Ava lingered by her locker, organizing her books and avoiding eye contact with anyone who walked past. She was about to leave when Jake appeared at the far end of the hallway, flanked by Ryan and Chris. They weren't alone this time. A few other students trailed behind them, egging them on. Jake's jaw was set in a grim line, and his fists clenched at his sides. Whatever he was planning, it wasn't going to be subtle. "Ava," Jake called out, his voice echoing through the empty corridor. "We need to talk." Ava closed her locker and turned to face him, her expression calm but alert. "About what?" Jake stepped closer, stopping a few feet away. "You humiliated me yesterday in front of everyone." His voice was low, almost growling. "That doesn't fly with me." Ava crossed her arms. "I didn't humiliate you. You did that all on your own." Jake's face flushed red, whether from anger or embarrassment. It was hard to tell. "You think you're so tough, huh? Let's see how tough you really are." Before Ava could respond, Jake lunged forward, shoving her hard against the lockers. The impact rattled her bones, but she didn't fall. Instead, she straightened up slowly, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the situation. Ryan and Chris moved to block her escape route, while the other students formed a loose circle around them, cheering Jake on. "You shouldn't have done that," Ava said quietly, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. Jake smirked, clearly pleased with himself. "Oh yeah? What are you going to do about it?" Without warning, Ava sprang into action. She sidestepped Jake's next punch, grabbed his arm, and twisted it behind his back in one fluid motion. He yelped in pain, struggling to break free, but Ava held firm. Then, with minimal effort, she swept his legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the floor. Before Ryan and Chris could react, she spun around and delivered a swift kick to Ryan's chest, knocking him backward. Chris froze, wide-eyed, too afraid to make a move. The crowd fell silent, stunned by what they had just witnessed. Ava stood over Jake, who lay sprawled on the ground, clutching his bruised arm. "I warned you," she said simply, her tone icy. For a moment, no one moved. Then, realizing the fight was over, the spectators began to disperse, muttering among themselves. Some looked impressed, others scared, but none dared to challenge her. Jake scrambled to his feet, shooting Ava a glare filled with equal parts hatred and fear. Without another word, he stormed off, followed closely by Ryan and Chris. Ava exhaled deeply, feeling a mix of relief and guilt wash over her. She hadn't wanted things to escalate like this, but Jake had left her no choice. Still, she couldn't deny the rush of satisfaction that came with proving she could handle herself. Word of the confrontation spread quickly, reaching the ears of the principal by the end of the day. Security footage confirmed that Jake and his friends had initiated the altercation, leaving Ava blameless. Jake, Ryan, and Chris were suspended for a week, while Ava received a brief lecture about avoiding unnecessary conflict. It wasn't ideal, but compared to the alternative, she considered it a win. That evening, as Ava sat on her bed scrolling through social media, she noticed something surprising. Messages poured in from classmates she barely knew, congratulating her for standing up to Jake and his crew. Some even admitted they'd been too scared to speak out against them before, but hoped Ava's actions would inspire others to do the same. Reading those words made her chest swell with pride. Maybe she wasn't just a target anymore. Maybe she was becoming something else entirely. As she drifted off to sleep, Ava thought about everything that had happened. The secrets revealed, the fights fought, the friendships forming. Life at Lincoln High was far from perfect, but for the first time she felt like she might actually survive it. and perhaps in the process she could discover more about who she truly was. Document. Part 4. The days that followed were strange for Ava. Life at Lincoln High had changed in ways she hadn't expected. Jake, Ryan, and Chris were absent due to their suspensions, leaving a noticeable void in the hallways where their loud laughter and domineering presence used to be. Without them around, the school felt quieter, almost peaceful. Students who had once tiptoed around the trio now walked with more confidence, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. But Ava's newfound reputation was impossible to ignore. Everywhere she went, people whispered about her strength and reflexes, speculating endlessly about how she'd managed to take down Jake and his friends so easily. Some called her a hero, others labeled her dangerous. Rumors swirled like wildfire. She was part of some secret government program. She practiced martial arts since childhood, or maybe she really was part robot. None of it was true, but Ava didn't bother correcting them. Letting people believe what they wanted seemed easier than explaining the real truth. Emma Lewis became one of the few constants in Ava's life during this time. The two girls started sitting together at lunch every day, sharing stories and laughing over inside jokes. Emma never pushed Ava to reveal her secrets, though her curiosity was obvious. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share," Emma said one afternoon, biting into an apple. "But I'll always be here if you need someone to talk to." Ava appreciated the gesture more than she could say. Having even one person she could trust made all the difference. For the first time since arriving at Lincoln High, Ava began to feel like she might actually fit in somewhere. At home, Ava spent hours talking with her grandmother Maria about her grandfather Vin Diesel and the legacy he'd left behind. Maria pulled out old photo albums and documents, showing Ava pictures of Vin training with soldiers, standing beside scientists in lab coats, and even posing with world leaders. Each image told a piece of the story, a man who had been stronger, faster, and more resilient than anyone else, yet chose to walk away from fame and danger to live a quiet life. "He gave up everything to protect us," Maria explained one evening as they sat side by side on the couch. "He didn't want anyone exploiting his abilities or yours for their own gain. That's why we've kept it a secret for so long." Ava nodded thoughtfully. She understood the reasons behind the secrecy, but she also realized she couldn't hide forever. Her abilities weren't just a burden, they were a gift. And like her grandmother had said, it was up to her to decide how to use them. Meanwhile, Jake and his friends returned to school after their suspension ended. They kept their distance from Ava, avoiding eye contact and steering clear of any situations that might provoke her. It was clear they hadn't forgotten what happened, but their fear of her outweighed their desire for revenge, for now at least. Still, Ava knew better than to let her guard down completely. People like Jake didn't forgive easily. One afternoon, during a science class, Ava found herself paired with Alex Carter for a lab assignment. Alex was tall and lanky, with messy brown hair and glasses that constantly slid down his nose. He wasn't particularly outgoing, but he had a sharp mind and a dry sense of humor that Ava liked. As they worked together, Alex glanced at her occasionally, as if debating whether or not to say something. Finally, he blurted out, "So, are you like superhuman or something?" Ava froze, caught off guard by the question. "What makes you ask that?" Alex shrugged, adjusting his glasses nervously. "I mean, gym class last week? You ran faster than anyone I've ever seen. And then there's the whole, you know what." He gestured vaguely toward the hallway where the fight with Jake had taken place. Ava hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. She trusted Alex enough to know he wouldn't spread rumors, but she still didn't feel ready to open up completely. Instead, she smiled faintly and said, "Let's just say I'm full of surprises." Alex grinned back, clearly intrigued. "Well, whatever you are, I'm glad you're on our side." Their partnership turned out to be surprisingly effective. By the end of the period, they had completed the lab ahead of schedule, earning praise from the teacher. As they cleaned up their station, Alex asked casually, "Hey, do you want to grab coffee sometime? There's this cool cafe downtown that serves amazing hot chocolate." Ava blinked, surprised by the invitation. "Sure, she said after a moment. That sounds fun. As word of Ava's friendship with Alex spread, some students began to see her in a new light. She wasn't just the girl who took down Jake Miller. She was approachable, kind, and genuinely interested in getting to know people. Even those who had initially feared her started warming up to her, realizing she wasn't looking for trouble unless it came looking for her. Still, not everyone was happy about Ava's growing popularity. A small group of students, led by a boy named Tyler Bennett, resented her sudden rise to prominence. Tyler was quiet and unassuming, but he harbored a deep jealousy toward anyone who drew attention away from him. He saw Ava as a threat, a shiny, new toy everyone wanted to play with, and decided to do something about it. One Friday afternoon, after school let out, Ava stayed late to finish a project in the art room. When she finally left the building, she noticed Tyler leaning against a tree near the parking lot, scrolling through his phone. At first, she thought nothing of it, assuming he was waiting for a ride. But as she approached, Tyler stood up and blocked her path. "Can I help you?" Ava asked, her tone polite but firm. Tyler smirked, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Just wanted to see what all the fuss is about," he said. "Everyone acts like you're some kind of superhero. Thought I'd test that theory." Before Ava could respond, Tyler lunged forward, aiming a punch at her face, but Ava was faster. She ducked under his arm, grabbed his wrist, and twisted it gently. Not enough to hurt him, but enough to make her point. "I don't want to fight you," she said calmly. "Just leave me alone." Tyler struggled to break free, his face turning, red with frustration. "You think you're better than everyone else, don't you?" he spat. "Well, guess what? You're not." "I never said I was," Ava replied, releasing him. "But I'm not afraid to stand up for myself either." For a moment, Tyler stared at her, breathing heavily. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed off, muttering under his breath. Ava watched him go, feeling a mix of pity and irritation. She didn't understand why people felt the need to pick fights with her, but she was done letting it bother her. If they wanted to hate her, fine. But she wasn't going to waste energy hating them back. When Ava got home, Maria was waiting for her in the kitchen, sipping a cup of tea. "How was your day?" she asked, noticing the thoughtful expression on Ava's face. "It was eventful," Ava admitted, dropping her backpack on the counter. She recounted the encounter with Tyler, careful to downplay the tension. "I handled it, though, no big deal." Maria studied her for a moment, then nodded approvingly. "You're learning when to hold back and when to act. That's important. Strength isn't just about power, it's about control." Ava smiled faintly, feeling a flicker of pride. For the first time, she truly believed what her grandmother had been trying to teach her. Being strong wasn't about proving yourself to others. It was about knowing who you were and staying true to that no matter what challenges came your way. That night, as Ava lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she thought about everything that had happened, from the cafeteria incident to the showdown in the hallway. Each moment had shaped her in ways she couldn't have predicted. She wasn't just surviving at Lincoln High anymore. She was thriving. And while she still had plenty of questions about her abilities and her family's past, she felt ready to face whatever came next. Because one thing was certain: Ava Carter wasn't afraid of anything or anyone anymore. Document. Part 5. By the time spring arrived, Ava had settled into a rhythm at Lincoln High. The days of constant stares and whispers had faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance. People still talked about her, how she'd taken down Jake Miller, how she moved faster than anyone else in gym class. But the gossip no longer carried the same edge. Instead of fear or suspicion, most students now looked at her with admiration. She wasn't just the new girl anymore. She was part of the fabric of the school. Ava's friendships deepened too. Emma became one of her closest confidants, always ready with advice or a laugh when Ava needed it. Alex continued to hang out with her after school, their coffee dates turning into regular study sessions at the cafe downtown. Even some of the quieter students like Mia Torres and Sam Chen started sitting with her at lunch, drawn by her calm demeanor and genuine interest in getting to know them. But despite the growing sense of belonging, Ava couldn't shake the feeling. that something bigger was waiting for her. Her grandmother's stories about Vin Diesel and his extraordinary abilities lingered in her mind, raising questions she didn't yet have answers to. What did it mean to carry such a legacy? How far did her powers go? And what responsibilities came with them? One Saturday morning, Maria surprised Ava by announcing they were going on a road trip. "We're visiting your grandfather," she said simply, tossing a duffel bag into the trunk of their old sedan. "He's been asking about you." Ava froze, stunned. "Wait, you mean Vin Diesel? He wants to meet me?" Maria nodded, smiling softly. "He knows about everything that's happened at school. He thinks it's time you two talked." The drive took several hours, winding through rolling hills and dense forests until they reached a secluded cabin tucked away in the mountains. It was small but cozy, with wooden beams and large windows that let in streams of golden sunlight. Outside, a man stood chopping firewood, his muscles rippling with each swing of the axe. Despite his age, he looked as strong and imposing as the photos Maria had shown Ava. When he turned around, Ava caught her breath. His face was weathered but kind, his dark eyes sharp and piercing. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Vin Diesel stepped forward, extending a hand. "You must be Ava," he said, his voice deep and steady. "I've heard a lot about you." Ava shook his hand, her own trembling slightly. "It's nice to meet you." They spent the afternoon talking, Vin sharing stories about his life before retiring from public view. He spoke openly about the experiments, the battles he'd fought, and the sacrifices he'd made to protect his family. "Strength isn't just about physical power," he told her. "It's about knowing when to use it and when not to. You'll learn that in time." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Vin handed Ava a small leather-bound journal. Inside were notes and sketches detailing his experiences, along with exercises designed to help her understand and control her abilities. "This is for you," he said. "Use it wisely." The next day, as they drove back home, Ava flipped through the pages of the journal, marveling at its contents. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, as if she finally understood why she was different. Her powers weren't just a quirk, they were a responsibility, and she was determined to live up to it. Back at school, things continued to improve. Jake and his friends avoided her completely, their egos bruised beyond repair. Tyler Bennett kept his distance as well, though Ava occasionally caught him glaring at her from across the cafeteria. But she didn't let it bother her. She focused, instead, on building connections with those who mattered, finding joy in simple moments like laughing with Emma or helping Sam with his math homework. One afternoon, during a school assembly, Principal Thompson called Ava to the stage to present an award for outstanding courage and leadership. The entire auditorium erupted in applause as Ava accepted the plaque, her cheeks flushing red. She hadn't expected recognition, but it felt good to know her actions had made a difference. That evening, as Ava sat on her bed reviewing the journal her grandfather had given her, she reflected on how much had changed since her first day at Lincoln High. She had started as an outsider, unsure of herself and her place in the world. Now she was stronger, not just physically but emotionally and mentally. She knew who she was, and she wasn't afraid to embrace it. Her phone buzzed, breaking her concentration. It was a text from Emma. "Hey, want to come over tomorrow? My mom made cookies." Ava smiled, typing back quickly. "Sure, see you then." As she set her phone aside and returned to the journal, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Life wasn't perfect. There would always be challenges and uncertainties, but she was ready to face them head-on. With her family's legacy guiding her and her friends supporting her, Ava knew she could handle anything. And so, as the seasons changed and the future stretched ahead of her, Ava Carter stepped forward with confidence, ready to write her own story, one filled with strength, courage, and heart.